Welcome to the Coaching Family Soccer Coaching Podcast, a podcast for soccer coaches from grassroots to the pro game. Soccer coaches who love the game, love coaching, and want to get better. Join our community on Twitter at Coaching Family.
So guys, welcome back to another show, the Coaching Family Soccer Coaching Podcast. I'm joined by a dream team of coaches there tonight. If I was going to have an academy, these two would be to the first names on the team sheet. Obviously, Glen Hicks, welcome as always.
Cheers, mate. Looking forward to this one.
Yeah, and Harry Watling, all the way from, I think he's in Tampa, but as Harry Watling, all the way from America, former academy coach at Chelsea, West Ham, Millwall, now first team head coach at Hartford in Connecticut. H, how's it going, mate?
Yeah, good. I'm looking forward to it as well. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, we appreciate it, mate. Look, thanks for taking the time. It's always good to get some more voices. And today, the topic of the show is overloads. And I thought it'd be apt to have you, H, just obviously with your experience working, from H to the first team, and you can share some of your knowledge and what it's like really delivering this sort of thing up at the highest level. But give us what's your, if I say to you overloads, what's your initial thoughts on that, H? What do you think about that?
I just think it's the thing that we search for in the game, isn't it? It's, especially I feel like if you start at a real base level, it's about that decision making and trying to find the spare player. When you're working with the little ones, it's do they use them to give them the ball, or do they use them by not giving them the ball? And then at the top level, first team level, is what you want to find on the pitch, all over the pitch, whether you're building. You want to use your goalkeeper, your six to make the extra one, or you're talking about the final third. They're the things that come to mind for me straight away.
How important are overloads at that first team level, at the highest level?
Yeah, no, they're massive. They're massive. I think initially we'll try and get the ball into our exciting players to isolate. But if you can isolate by outnumbering, it's even better for me. It's even better. I think you find that your magicians on the pitch will create those overloads either by creating them, giving someone the ball and setting that scenario up with a pass, or they'll go and find a space where they become a part of that act, if you like. But they're massive, so they're really important.
So then how much, what does that look like in your training program and, in practice? How does give us a bit of an idea of the detail. How do you deliver that detail on the pitch to the players, or maybe off the pitch and stuff like that?
Yeah, no. We predominantly play with wingers constantly. So whether that's a 4-3-3 or a 3-4-3. So, we'll try and occupy the spaces where we can't really be marked. And it's quite fashionable to call them half spaces and whatnot. But I'll just say sort of stand out position, stand in awkward spots where, you can create space, find space. And then in the practices, regardless of what you're doing, there's got to be an element of decision making to it. So even if we're doing a directional possession, there's always going to be a constant to try and isolate, try and find an advantage, try and find a space to find an advantage. And then you build that up towards the main event, which is the game. So for me, ideally it's isolating a centre half or isolating a fullback into an awkward scenario where they've got to defend space and the man and the ball. For me, that's the ideal scenario that we try and create.
Interesting. Glenn, what's your thoughts? If I say overloads, what's your immediate thoughts about that?
Yeah, it was interesting. We're just going to go with that, just pounce on a little concept there that Harry was talking about. And again, it goes in with what we were saying the other day. So there's concepts there that you can put into a kid's head at 9 years old. So when he was talking about going in almost unorthodox positions, if you encourage a child to stand between two players, or if there's three players, stand in the pocket in a triangle between three, or can you find a pocket between four? You can see it now, fullback, midfielders, or two centre-backs, two centre-mids. That basic concept we was talking about the other day, so that can start from under 9s and 10s in terms of concept and being unorthodox with your positioning. But obviously at the top end where Harry's working now, it's obviously about exploiting it and being super efficient with it, isn't it? So it's interesting to see about the way he's talking about positioning now.
Yeah, so then thinking about we go to the the beginning of the player development cycle. All of us have worked with the 8s and 9s and that sort of thing. What's your thoughts on delivering it at the very youngest age groups? What does that look like? Do you think? What's the most effective way do it at the younger stage group to make it productive and when they get to the older stage groups?
Yeah, I used to do it back to front, to be honest, and I'm not sure it was everyone's cup of tea, but I would always start 1v1 and then introduce the additional player, so they would start to think 2v1. So to a certain eye, you might be making it easier for the player, but I think when you introduce an extra decision, you're just trying to broaden their horizons on it. So it's not necessarily always worrying about, am I making the practice easier? It's, am I adding an extra tool? And then it comes down to, the player's maturity, where they are on that development cycle. I think, am I going to, like I said it before, you either use him legitimately to set him up and let him go and let him play, or you use him to bounce and combine, or you use him to fake and go yourself. And I think that then boils down to, the craft, the flair, the decision making. I know we're quite similar, so we never really used to encourage the players to overly give the ball to anyone else, as in those younger age groups, because we wanted them to develop themselves. But that decision making tool at the top end, it has to be developed in those age groups. At the top end, it's the most important thing, your decisions. I've seen many a player that have got all the tools, but that capacity to make that split second decision of, whether to give and go, whether to give and support underneath, or whether to not give at all and use to almost fake is really key and really important.
Yeah, it's a great point. And essentially what you said there, start with 1v1 and then move up to 2v1. So we had this conversation the other day when we were talking about what sort of sessions we're designing. I also sometimes say, I think sometimes coaches work too much on the overloads at the younger stage groups. And then we had to, when you potentially put them into a 1v1 or a 2v2 and there's no overload, they struggle because they don't have that easy pass, if you like. And I think that's a potential issue where you hammer it so much. And I've seen it, like, especially so much rondo work and possession work at the younger stage groups. There's always an overloaded that never underloaded, or just man on man, player on player. Then maybe that there's you're missing a trick because the player's always got an easy decision to make where they need to solve the problem themselves. What's your thought on that, H?
Yeah, no, I think you have to strip it right back, and don't forget, the main way you create an overload in the first place is by outplaying 1v1. That's the main way, that for me, again, what a 1v1 player breaks any tactic in the world. So the game will always start 11v11. Everyone will stand where they stand from kickoff, but then it's about creating and finding space. And that sort of mini 4v4 game that's going on the right-hand side of the pitch can soon become a 4v3 by someone outplaying or combining, or like I say, leaving it for someone in a better, more advantageous position. So I think you have to do it like that, to be honest with you. I've always been really strong on that. I hate to see a good player, or what's seen as a good player, in an awkward position at 12, 13, 14, 15, and they just don't have it in their locker to get out of trouble themselves. And I feel like that's been because they've not been put in those positions in the first place as a younger player by their coach. So I think it's really important. Yeah,
and then I suppose that's it. It's a lot easier to coach, in a 2v1 situation than it is to try and develop a player to beat in a 1v1. Right, I suppose of that. Glen, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, just touching on the individual tools that you've got to create the overloads is really important. So if you think of like a Busquets, Iniesta and Messi as three key players, and they was all really, really good at creating overloads, and you could probably chuck a Dani Alves into that as well, that they would all do it in their own way. So Busquets would obviously do his obvious stuff, maybe look one way, close his hips and pull a pass through the lines. And he's obviously penetrated the lines there and created some form of overload. But then you would have had on the other end of that, the receiving, Iniesta drifting in them unorthodox positions like Harry was talking about a minute ago to receive it, and they go at the back four. But then at times, so you look at Atletico Madrid the other night, that they really stubbornly beat Manchester United and deserved to win. And they weren't giving up overloads. They weren't surrendering spaces. And that's when maybe your Lionel Messi drops on the ball. We can all picture the goal against Real Madrid, the one where Busquets just literally drops it to him and says, go and do your stuff. And sometimes whether it's individual brilliance taking a whole team on, or, Messi will drop into midfield areas and people think it's because he's getting impatient, but really the passing's not working and they want to drop him in there to go past one or two to then get a 3v2. So it's an important point that Harry made there. And I think coaches need to consider that. How many different ways are we creating? How are we using the players' tools they've got to create the overload is a really important one with session design, I think, as well.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, if you talk about session design, and then what does it look like? You talked about 1v1s and then going into like a 2v1. But what other things, if you're like if you're an under nines coach, you've got your boys for an hour a week or the girls for an hour a week. What sort of stuff are you practically delivering to try and get the overload in there?
I think I would. Again, I would start off just with the 1v1 confrontation before I'd introduce that, and the different ways of the different scenarios that happens. Does it happen front on? Does it happen sort of front to back? The most popular one in the Premier League is actually when the player is behind you. So that's a high percentage of those 1v1s where you imagine the wide player dropping in, facing his own goal, fullback going really tight, and you having to wriggle away. Then the introduction for me would come from, do you want to make it directional so it looks more like the game? Do you want to have, multiple goals where you've got bounce players so that they've got to be able to twist their hips and outplay, twist, turn, combine, use different surfaces of the foot? It has to be, for me, so it has to be all built around that, and all built around that central player that can almost show their stuff. And this is how I do it myself. This is how I do it myself using a teammate, and then this is how I do it myself by almost setting up the teammate in that scenario.
Yeah, I mean, and I suppose you talk about directional. So you think of like a classic overload practice, it'd be like 2v1 to a goal or something like that. I suppose it's just thinking of creative way. I remember John McDermott used to do one. That's difficult if you're listening, but he'd have three players in a triangle. The top player in a triangle has the ball, passes to one player. The other player hasn't got the ball, drops and becomes a defender, and that creates a 2v1. And he always talked about driving at the heart of the player. Then the other player's got the decision: does he stay wide? Does he do like an underlap or overlap or something like that? So you talk about the movement, driving direct at the defender to make them engage them, to make them commit, and then popping it round or faking or whatever. And then almost a transition where there's another ball coming. So then a player out wide's got a ball come across the box, and you got 2v1 in the box as well. So it's a different sort of overload, isn't it? So you've got that one in the box, then I've got find the spare pass in the box of like a cutback sort of thing. So it's like a two-phase sort of practice, which I think always sort of interesting. Any sort of practices that stick out to you, Glen, like that? Any sort of favourite practices?
Yeah, I when I do a hell of a lot of overloads. But again, like we were saying the other day, Saul, I do it more because of the style of play that I want to encourage from kids right up to, if I was working senior football, like I do with the 16 to 20-year-olds at the minute, trying to prepare them for senior football. I do the overloads as much to coach the defenders, because I think we're going to be a team that want to dominate the ball today, right? So we're going to play, have majority of possession. We're not going to find ourselves in organised defending much. So actually, we're going to do a lot of 2v1s, 3v2s, and 4v3s. But in my planning, so I always do, can we create some +1 situations or some -1 and +2? It's very rare the game gets to +3, because if you're in a 4v1 situation, the game must be in serious chaos. But it's about creating the situations. Where do you want it? Do you want it around the penalty box? So are the team going to play an extreme low block today? This is more at the top end, obviously. But if it is, then we have to play in a tighter space, and the overload will look different. But if it's build-up play, and sometimes I think kids find it difficult to play out from the back. But if it's build-up play from the back, there will always be an obvious pass, and the obvious one is the goalkeeper. So try to get the goalkeeper in the session as much as possible if it's working with the defenders. But obviously, if it's at the top end, it's more about creating that situation. Do you know what I mean? Almost chopping out a bit of the pitch and saying, okay, what area are we working on, and what type of overload is it we're trying to create?
So one of your 4v3s, for example, what would that be? One of those different scenarios? It could be any of those scenarios. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, well, sometimes, so I'll do, like a wave practice. So we'll start with in threes. Yeah. And again, if you want to go from the halfway line and you think, oh, you know what, the boys are not good at exploiting spacing behind, I'll start a wave practice from the halfway line to the goal and just get them working the patterns. And then we'll go, right, now let's go opposed. You attack and then you defend. And then just chuck a magic man in there. So work on your number 9s and say, right, now it's a 3v3. So you attack 3 towards the goal. You immediately turn and recover. So you're working on your recovery defending, and it's a 3v3. If you just drop a number 9 in there, and I like to have several number 9s on the side of the pitch, having a couple of goes in there. Do you know what I mean? So the wave practice is constantly going. And again, if you can shorten the pitch or lengthen the pitch, depending on what your outcomes are, but then you're specifically working on your number 9, and you might even say like, okay, can we play off the number 9 as the first point of attack? Or it could be, can we play wide? Do you know what I mean? But that's just one way to do it in a wave practice. But I do like to do it in front of the goal a hell of a lot, though. So,
yeah, and you mentioned playing out from the back. I mean, really, that is about trying to create a new numerical overload, isn't it, from your players? Have the extra player, and if to go playing through, going around, or going over, I mean, that's the reality, isn't it, H? I suppose at the highest level, trying to create an extra man who's trying to play at the back.
Yeah, and there's like certain key components that, you know, I would call them non-negotiables, to be honest with you, that we have, which we need to create. Ideally, we need to create that 6v4 at the bottom if we can. I think your front three, if you play with a front three, they have to stay high and wide, and freeze the back line. It'll be an 8v6 or a 6v4, depending on what your two high midfielders want to do. Fullbacks, really important.
Just go with that. Just so obviously your front, you want your front three pinning the back four. Then I suppose, isn't it? So then that creates the overload. So just explain to the coaches and talk a bit more through detail about that.
It's the back line in general. So out here, we a lot of teams play 3-4-3 out here. So a lot of teams play a back three. So for me, I want the wide players to try and stay in the eye line of the wing back, so the wing back doesn't jump onto the clip ball, because that clip ball that goes into our fullback, if it's on, then they'll try and release themselves. But front three stay high straight away. Now, if you've got 3 players freezing 4 players or freezing 5 players, straight away you've got your advantage. Then it's about using your goalkeeper. Then it's about your serving lines. You're 8 and 10. You know, again, for us, we want them outside the eye line of their markers to create that lane that goes straight into the 9. So probably similar to what Glen was talking about there, in terms of if you're trying to create a practice where you want a service line that goes directly to feet, to the 9 or chest, then you need those guys outside, flipped outside the eye line of their 2 markers, and staying away. Really important that they stay away and they trust that first building phase. And for us, ultimately, is to get the ball into that first or second line and get front facing, because I want teams to press us. The worst thing in the world for me is being 1-0, 2-2, whatever, or 1-0 down, and they've got all 11 behind the ball. It's hard to break down. It is hard to break down. So I want teams to be front foot against us. That helps our structure. We've got good technicians in the group that are, that don't mind getting on it under pressure, receiving it in, an area as tight as a phone box, if you like. And then it's about, making sure that you can play off your right hand and play off your left hand into your 6 or your fullback if you're a centre half. You can play with depth and detail. We also say to our centre backs to play with better variety. So it's not just about head down and playing the first 12 to 15 yards. It's 1 in 3, 1 in 4. Can you search beyond? If you do search beyond, then the movement's got to be accurate. How do we manipulate that? Then your front three changes. Your 9 drops in. Your 2 wide players come in and go beyond, and it starts to look like a 4-diamond 2. And then it's about fluidity, and goes all the way back to what we spoke about earlier of being, when you're in possession, being out of position.
Interesting. And so, a couple of questions on that. Then, how patient do you have to be in developing that? How hard is that to get to the point where, I suppose, you and the players trust it and they're confident doing it? We've seen it like even in the Premier League when you get the pundits. If anyone loses the ball, they criticise. Why are they playing out? Just yell it. But then as soon as they're playing out, then everyone's celebrating it. And then 2, what does that look like on the training pitch? How do you deliver that? How do you get that through to the players?
Right, let me go 2 first, and then I'll go 1 second. So 2 is every day. I'll get on the plane. I will get on the plane tomorrow, 100% frustrated with something that I've already spoken about 3 times, and it's not happened. That's football. That happens at every single level. I see, so I see you smiling. It's like it happens. I speak to a lot of my friends in the game, and it happens at Premier League level. It happens at grass. It happens at every level. We just have to really nail down those principles of what we're after. And in terms of sort of how you implement it, it's every day. So we try to, if we can, get into the habit of, we deliver a small, and when I say small, I'm talking 3 minutes video. Fellas, this is the plan for today. This is what we're after. This is what it looks like. So you're coaching before you get on the grass. And that's really, really important. If you have the facilities to do so in a full-time environment, it's really helpful. And those will look like clips of elite level. It will look like clips of us doing it, whether that be in a practice scenario or at elite level, live on the TV. And then it's going out there. And then we revisit that every day. So it'll be a small snapshot of yesterday. Fellas, this was us building against a mid-block. This was us trying to hook their 9 out so that the centre half can break lines or step between. whatever it might be. And then again, it's about, you know, every day, everything you build around practice design, even if it's your boxes at the beginning, like your boxes at the beginning, where do you want your centre halves in the boxes? Where do you want your 9 in the boxes? You know, do you want your 9 at the top of the box? Has your box got an outcome? Do you have too many goals where it's got to come off the line to set back to go in? Do you want your centre half serving into the pitch? Where do you want your fullbacks? So it's everything for me. It's everything, and it's a process that, like, I mean, if it happens overnight, I don't know about it. I want to know about it. I want to learn about how you can do it quickly. But it's every day, you know, hammering it away, and then the buy-in from the players. You have to sell the idea to them and then inspire their execution.
So give us an idea then. What's like a typical session? I'm getting a point here, but I'm just nosy, so I want to know. So tell us like a typical session would look like for in a day, or, you know, you're delivering in a week.
Yeah, no. Let me go for a week because it probably provides you a little bit more context. So next week, Monday will just be a re-entry day. So it's about flushing the legs for the players. So the video will be post-match. So our post-match of, you know, what we did well, and we call it, you know, this is something that I've taken from a friend of mine. We call it owning the ball, owning the pitch, owning both boxes, rather than in possession, out of possession. Owning the ball, owning the pitch, owning both boxes. So how we own the ball against the opposition, and how we dominated the pitch out of possession. And we go through that. Then Monday session will be a flush. So we'll get the little tables out. They'll play some 2-touch. There'll be some boxes. And then we'll do a little bit of 5-a-side. And the players that played the most minutes will then come away. They'll do some IDPs, which is just some individual development points on. It might be some small bits. And then the guys that didn't play as many minutes, they will go and do a little bit more. And we'll do that in game-based scenarios. So we don't really ever run them. So it's, you know, everything is, you know, is an outcome with the ball. And then that's led by the sports scientist. And then Tuesdays and Wednesdays is owning the ball and the game plan around how we win the game. So I never build the opposition up like they're Real Madrid. It's about how we go and win the game, how we dominate the ball. And that session will generically, it will be, you know, if I was to just say, you know, what did Tuesday session look like this week? Tuesday session was boxes at the beginning after they've warmed up. And the boxes were actually similar to what we've spoken about, where it was a 4v3 in the first part of the box. You have to exit the first part of the box with 5 passes because, again, on a regain, we have a rule that we have to get to 5 if we can't break quickly. So we have to get to 5. So get to 5, open the second part of the box through the midfielder, play off the 9, runners beyond. And this week, obviously, this is going to go out later, so it's not a problem. But this week, our game plan is how we create a diamond against Tampa with our 9. So we're going to play a number 10 as a number 9. So all week it was about how he comes in off the line and how our 2 forwards go beyond. After that, we did a small phase. So again, the phase was goalkeeper included, back 4, just a midfield line of engagement, creating a 4v2, so it'd be a 3v2 because they play a 3-4-3. How we get through the first 2 parts of the pitch, and how we get into the final third, and how we create from that. And then we did a scenario-based 11v11. So just to capture the imagination of the players, I use a whiteboard, but I do a lot of old school games, if you like. So I find a team in the past that have played the opposition shape, find a team in the past that have played our shape, and then say, okay, this is the scenario. You'll be Barcelona 2005, whatever it is. You'll be Chelsea 2005. These are your player cards. So I coach one team. The other team, I'll give them player cards of 2 outcomes: in possession, out possession of the ball. This is what we expect from you with the ball. With the ball, break lines. Without the ball, stop the 9 from dropping in, etc. So that was Tuesday. Wednesday is without the ball, owning the pitch. Do we want to go and stand on the opposition? Do we want to invite? Do we want to press? And then Friday is very light. We do a lot of set pieces Friday. We do a little bit of pattern work of things that we might want to see in the game. And then in terms of video is probably 2 hours a week in total, and probably 15-20 minutes each segment of the day. And some days, Saul, it will be sort of 10 minutes before the session. It might be 15 minutes after the session. But we do a fair bit of video, and then that's backed up with a lot of individual meetings. Players will come in a lot. and I share that with me and my coaches of individual clips and trying to link it all back in and sew it all together with what we're after.
Interesting. Just going to quickly think about, like, especially particularly the Tuesday. I mean, pretty much every session, every practice had some element of overloads, and they were trying to create overloads in there, right? So it just goes to show you how important it is. So what do you like to, now? Because obviously you're at first team level now. Does that have an effect about how you would look back and think how you're going to coach the younger players, the 8s and 9s? Obviously, you've gone through all the way. You've coached in every development phase, and they do first team. Has that changed your outlook, your vision, or is it still the same?
Yeah, do you know what? My answer to that is absolutely not and definitely. So if I can explain what that means. So I always thought to myself, I don't want to get to first team level and then kind of think, I want to completely change the wheel of what was going on before. And I've really backed my beliefs. I think one thing I have noticed massively is you see what they haven't had. You can see those clear missing ingredients, what they haven't had. So it's when I say when, because I definitely will, because when I worked in academy football, it was my favourite days in football. When I go and work in an academy again, I think I'll be better, because you see those clear deficiencies of and the why. The why is the big thing of a great player, great vision, fantastic first touch, cannot get out of trouble on his own. Cannot get out of trouble, can't wriggle, can't twist and turn, can't feint. Why? Well, it's because he wasn't exposed to X, Y, and Z. Or player B, who's really big, really physical, can't use his size correctly. Why? Why is that? Well, it's because of X, Y, and Z. Or you get a runner, someone that's has got fantastic pace, but in their head wants to be a Messi and drop a shoulder and do a step over when they could just use their main weapon. Why? So it always goes back to why. And I think probably the two clear things for me is, number one, we've been talking about it, was the practice design correct, and were the outcomes for the player or were they for the coach? That's a really, really important one. Were they for the player or were they for the coach? Did the coach want the practice to look really good? Was it actually, should it be more player centered? Was the pitch long enough for the runner? Was it long enough? So we spoke about, you asked me about practice design with an overload, and you spoke about something John McDermott did. I used to use loads of different outcomes to suit different players. I would use mini goals. Why mini goals? Well, you might be working with an 8-year-old that cannot strike the ball properly, but has unbelievable vision. Balls on cones, same thing. End zones for your runners, because it's not really fair on the kid that's always going to be quick, that's quicker than everyone now. If we do a pitch which is 15 by 15, how's he going to ever use his weapon? So that's the why. And then the other why for me is identity. Like, why is there not a conversation going on with a 13, 14, 15-year-old of going, right, Jimmy, tell me what your two absolute key strengths are. They call it over here, they call it the elevator pitch. So you get in a lift. Within that 10 seconds, you've got to be able to tell someone what you're good at. Why are those conversations not going on more? Okay, tell me your two key strengths. Tell me your two weapons you're going into battle with today. Okay, do you know what? It's my pace, it's my power. Brilliant, use it. Use it more. This is when you use it. So for me, coming to first team level and seeing, I know this is the longest answer in the world, fellas, sorry, but
it's a good one.
The details, so it's all about, yeah.
Seeing the probably the grey areas and the grey spots, really highlights where the failings have been during their development pathway.
Interesting. Glen, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, just going back to a comment right at the beginning of the other question when he answered one or two there. That whole thing about, what Einstein said about, in theory and practice are the same, but in practice we know they're completely different, right? And that's where, all of this comes into it as well. And what's really fascinating there is Harry's still talking about individuals, Saul, and we've been banging on about individuals. For me, we still watch Premier League footballers, and I'm sure Harry sees it in America as well, and senior footballers. The game doesn't break down because they didn't understand the 3v2 or what it looked like. They probably had the intent to do it, but they had like Harry was saying there, the physical incompetency, or there was a technical deficiency somewhere, or there was a football intelligence thing. They missed timing of the pass, or passed it to the outside rather than inside a defender, or refused the pass and go on his own. So it's interesting to see, and I'm really pleased to hear that Harry passionately said that absolutely, he would do it the same way in terms of like, you know, building the individual 1v1 first at a young age and then profiling them more specifically to their personality as they go through the youth development phase and stuff. And it's it probably, the question I would say, if you don't mind me asking the question, is then how much would we say at senior level do individuals still need coaching as well? Do you know what I mean? So how much is geared around to individual clips? Because I think it needs to be more at team level. There's loads of this team tactical stuff, but how much is individual clips? You know what I mean? I know you said like 2-3 minutes, but how much time would you spend on it, Harry, in terms of correcting individual players at senior level?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. The answer is I don't think generically it's done enough, and I can't comment on anything that goes on outside of my four walls. But with us, we have a 15-minute block at the end of every session, 3 times a week. So all of the lads get an individual development plan every 6 weeks. So to kind of paint a picture for you guys and the guys listening is, it's a PDF. What are your 2 weapons? Profile picture of that player, talks about their personality word, and then it's three targets that they set theirself, and then I set them 1 target. At the end of the 6 weeks, that's then hyperlinked with a 2-minute video of each one, clips, they grade themselves. Now, at the end of each session, they have a 15-minute block. That 15-minute block, they can either go isolated, so if it's a fullback and he wants to work on his crossing, for me, 6 out of 10 is, okay, go and work on your crossing. 7 out of 10 is, okay, go and work on your crossing, being served the ball in by one of the midfielders who's got to work on that particular action. And 8 or 9 out of 10 is now go and put a centre forward in the box who's now got to work on his arrival time and timing of his run and angle of his run and execution of finish, etc. And then a 10 out of 10 is, okay, what about if we put some opposition in the way and whatever? But that's 15 minutes 3 times a week. That's a long time across a 10-month season. I mean, I'm not a mathematician, but what I do know is, you know, you're looking at sort of 3-4 hours a month that these boys are just solely focusing on their craft. And then the clips and the video, when they come into my office, then that's normally probably 15-20 minutes. And I don't do a lot of speaking. I do a lot of listening in that. So they come in, they've clipped, you know, they've either gone on Y Scout and waited for their clips to be uploaded so they can just go through it, or they've clipped it themselves. We use something called Speedio, where they can create their own tag panel, and their tag panel can be anything that they want. They come in and go over it and we discuss it. There's a lot of listening from me because, you know, I want to hear their understanding of what we feel as a team. And as a team, I mean, you know, myself, my staff and the players, what we feel, you know, that they need to get to, where they need to get to in order to improve. I think it needs to go on more. I think, you know, ultimately the team is the most important thing because, you know, it is what it is. 3 points are 3 points. Tonight, an individual, if we win the game, an individual is going to come up with a moment of brilliance to win us the game. So you have to respect that, and you can't lose view of that landscape, that the individual is going to be king in those, you know, those key moments.
Yeah, really interesting. A lot of my people might be surprised about first team players having IDPs. I know they do the same at Arsenal first. I think Carlos Cuerta does a lot of work in that area as well in terms of, you know, analysing game sort of stuff. I suppose it's interesting is, I suppose, like I say, how much time do you get to work with the players? What about then, H? What's your thoughts? You mentioned when you do the boxes and stuff, and that's another, you know, way to use overloads. What's your thoughts on that sort of thing with you know, working with 9s, 10s, 11s, 12s, 13s, you know, in the younger age groups? When and where is it appropriate? How much is it appropriate?
Listen, it depends on the context, and again, it depends on the why. I think I sit on the fence with certain things, and I don't do it because I don't want to answer the question. I do it because I don't know the context. So when I went to West Ham, every single age group, it's when Terry Wesley was the academy manager, every single age group did boxes at the start of every session. Every single age group. And I didn't know why. I'd never seen it before. I'd never seen an under-9s group do boxes. When we was at Millwall, I was extreme in every age group I worked at, whether it was 12s, whether it was 16s, on outplaying 1v1. Chelsea, we was, you know, when we worked there, Saul, we worked together. You know, we was all about mastering the ball, physically developing yourself to master the ball correctly, outplaying 1v1, thinking 2v1. And it took me probably like 2 or 3 months to really see some of the excellent outcomes of doing those things at West Ham. You know, the players could combine extremely quickly. They could make decisions extremely quickly to outplay using a teammate. But there's a trade-off with everything, isn't there? There's a trade-off. So you have to, I just keep saying the word, you have to understand the why, and you have to understand the benefits of doing it. So would a player that's exposed to that constantly, rather than exposed to a small-sided game. When I used to arrive in the Dome at Chelsea, me and Ozzy used to throw a ball in the middle of the pitch and let them play 5v5 on arrival. Then we'd throw a different ball on the pitch, which was a different colour. You wasn't allowed to pass. So you'd have a small-sided game going on. Then you'd have another ball on the pitch. It's like, you can't pass that one. If you land on that, you've got to go and try and do everybody. And again, it's like, that was our why. Our why was, well, when Callum Hudson-Odoi or Ben Elliott or Miles Peart-Harris lands on the ball, we want them to be fantastic at doing exactly that. Jamal Musiala, and it's not harm them, but I'm sure there's been thousands and thousands of players that have gone through the other way of doing it that have come through, and they're excellent players as well. So to answer your question, Saul, I don't think there's a right or wrong, as long as there's a method to your madness, if that makes sense.
Just try and think we'll come back to you in a second. To think, all those grassroots coaches out there, if I run a 10s or 11s team or girls team, boys team, whatever, what would be the major takeaways to this? You're going to recommend, we talk about overloads, we see how important it is at the top level. I mean, how important is it for them and, at that level, if that makes sense?
Yeah, no, look, I'll be really honest, like, why are you doing it? Like, if you're doing it because you want your under 10s, to play like Barcelona's 2011 team, like, what are you doing? Like, just develop your players. Push your strongest player now. It might not be your strongest player in 18 months. Push them in a certain way. Your player that might be struggling a little bit, like, help them. I think we want to get every player in that learning zone, as they call it. And I think your top players, you've probably got to stress them out a little bit to get them in the learning zone. And your players that are struggling, you've probably got to make them a little bit more comfortable to get them in the learning zone. And it's a cycle. But yeah, not for me. So not for me, that one. I think, it's like I said, I think it has to be done with a why and a reasoning behind it. It can't just be because it looks pleasing on the eye, a group of 10-year-olds playing one touch. I don't think anyone's massively developing as an individual doing that as a constant. I think there's got to be a real good variety in there.
Interesting. Glen, any thoughts?
Yeah, a lot of stuff there sort of comes back to like 3 of the C's of coaching, like the content. What are you coaching? Do you understand why you're coaching it? Again, that's got to be age, ability, and game centered. Of course, we've got to be teaching them the game. If we're not teaching them the game, so for example, if we're doing overloads without an offside line, well, that's fine. That is a central defence overload or a midfield overload. And as long as you can encourage it, say, for example, you want Iniesta to stand behind people in a so-called offside position. But then if we're doing overloads to work on the Jamie Vardys of this world and breaking in on, and we don't put an end line in the session, for example, then we're not really working on overloads, or not them specific overloads. And then you've got obviously the concept. And it's interesting what Harry said a while ago about grey areas. So I think it feels like Harry sits on the fence a bit like, you even had a pop at me. Come on, Glenn, stop sitting on the fence the other day, right? But genuinely, I think it's because we've coached in the grey area more than we have the black and the white. So there are some black and white concepts. So there are some absolute principal concepts of overloads. If you're -1, so if you're overloaded, -1, -2, you need to retreat, you need to surrender space, you need to be thoughtful, you need to almost survive. If you're +1, +2, yes, we want to go more aggressive, more direct, quicker, get to the goal. So as an example of a basic concept, some of these things are black and white. But when you're put into the conundrum, so Harry said lots of different players there, but so even in youth development, the players go through cycles as well. You can go from having a physically incredibly mature group to, working with little hobbits that are all like 3 foot tall. And do you know what I mean? And I think that's where a lot of this coaching lies. And I hope the listeners are picking up from Harry that is working in senior football, that actually a lot of that grey area stuff is where the magic of coaching happens. And yes, we've got to have the understanding of overloads, but we've got to know exactly what we're coaching and when. And the most important, like Harry said there, is the why. And I hope that the coaches are are picking up on that as well in terms of helping their players develop. So there's some great points in there.
Yeah, interesting. I think, yeah, you both have some really interesting point there, and it is points there, isn't it? I suppose it is that, you know, am I coaching the team to win, or am I coaching players to develop players? I suppose that's really the key, isn't it? I suppose the argument for when I see all these, you know, these pseudo specialists on Twitter, you know, saying, oh yeah, everything's a rondo, everything's gonna be rondo at 8, 7, 8, 9 years old. Fair enough, but it's, you know, there's, like you say, when are they getting their ball time? Do you know what I mean? Their individual ball time on it, and what are they really trying to achieve? H, any thoughts? Anything else?
No, I think it's spot on. I think the last thing you said is really important. You know, that really, really key that a footballer has time with a football. Like, really important. And it's, you know, such a basic thing to say, but I don't think Adele was created and developed into a world-class singer by passing the microphone to other people and you know, practicing herself. So
analogy.
That's my standpoint on it.
Wow, Glenn, any final thoughts on that?
Yeah, especially to the youth coaches of the younger age group. You know, I don't know how many times we keep saying this, so it should be in the opening of the podcast maybe, but keep bringing it back to the individual. Don't neglect the ball. You have to, you know, really dominate the ball and master the ball before you can the game. But, you know, keep teaching them the game, but try and always keep it age and ability relevant as well. And individuals, you know, you can see if Harry's saying now in 2022 that he's really focusing on individuals, and maybe 20 years ago, let's be honest, maybe that was lacking in British football as a general thing where individuals didn't really get coached. It was like, fellas, get out there, and when you're not performing, we'll take you off the pitch and we'll put someone else in. I hope that coaches of youth players are seeing that. So the more they're coaching their individuals to fit into the team and fit into the game, actually that's the environment they're going to be going into in 5-10 years time anyway. And try and get them, a really good thing I ain't spoke about yet, Saul, but I'm doing it to my college boys because 2 reasons. I think they're lazy learners, and I think they're holding their hands out too much for everyone to do stuff for them. So I'm similar to Harry. I've gone quite quiet, a lot of listening. Sometimes it's hard to do that when you feel like you've got a knowledge and a lot of things to say, but that's the skill of the coach again. And with this clipping thing, so we've got VO and we've got it as a tool. I don't do any individual clips. Some of the highlights in the games we'll do, and I know it's not performance-based yet. Yeah, they're still 16 to 21. They're learning how to get into, find their place into senior football somewhere, whether it's on the non-league pyramid or get a scholarship. But so I encourage them to do it. I might steer there. I might guide their thoughts. So, okay, look, some of your playing out from the back weren't too great. Clip all your bits on playing in your own half. I might say to the winger, look, your movement was a bit too static today. Think about the unorthodox runs we was talking about. Can you make more runs on the inside? And then I think giving them that ownership, and it's great to hear Harry saying it with the first team players, giving them that ownership of saying, look, come on, you've got to take responsibility for your own learning. It's such a powerful thing for the young kids. And I'm pleased it's actually going on at senior first team level as well, mate. So
interesting. And H, while we got you, tell us a little bit about just, you know, you've made a big step there. You've gone from academy football from West Ham, you cross the Atlantic to another country to coach at first team level. What have been the main challenges for you after you've done the whole season? Now you just come into your second season. What have been the major challenges for you?
Yeah, there's been a few. I mean, the first season it was very much just go and take the opportunity. So I didn't really have a massive say on the recruitment of any of the players. I was in, you know, that's your group. Go and coach them, try and develop winners. The travel was a big eye opener for me. The country is so big. You know, you fly to every game. It's, you know.
So for example, from Connecticut to Tampa, how long is that flight?
3 hours.
Wow.
For the players, like, you have to put it into context. So 3 hours doesn't sound massive, but you're up, do your presentation, your breakfast, etc. Then you're at the airport, waiting around in the airport, and your flight gets delayed. Then you're on the plane. Then you're off the plane. You're waiting for baggage. Then you're on the coach, 40 minutes to the hotel. Then you've got to go and flush the legs. That's every week. Then don't forget you're going over to the West Coast as well. So it might be 2 flights. It might be 3 flights, different time zones. Last year we played in Colorado and New Mexico, where at half time, because of the altitude, boys couldn't breathe. And that was like, it was a massive eye opener. I'm going at my wingers saying, you're picking it up, get at the fullback, get at him. He's going, Gaff, I can't. He's getting on the ball, bouncing it back one touch. I'm going, get at him, son. I literally can't. I can't. So that was good. Dealing with owners, dealing with expectations. Obviously dealing with media. So we're on ESPN every week. So when you win, you're the king. When you lose, you're useless. You're terrible. Dealing with defeat. Again, like I talk about this openly. I don't hide it. Every manager's record's on the internet, so you can't hide it. So we went through. We was expected to finish bottom. We've got the second smallest budget in the country. Our first 4 games. We went away to Miami and won. We beat New York Red Bulls 7-0. But then mid part of the season, I lost 5 on the spin. You lose 5 on the spin in football, you're down the road. You're done. And it was, for me, it was probably the best thing that's happened to me of how do you, after a loss on a Saturday, you've got to travel back with the players. You've got to have a certain mentality. You've got to have you've got to be seen in a certain way. Monday, how do you change it up? How do you stop that rot? How do you turn it around? So that was a big learning curve for me. Honestly, I say this to everyone that will listen. Last year was probably 5 years worth of learning in 1 year for me. It's by a mile the most I've developed in my career.
That's like, dealing with that pressure and the stress. What's that like? Sleepless nights and that sort of thing. Like say, you could do 5 on the bounce, and you've gone from beating Red Bull 7-0 to 5 on the bounce. It's the extremities of football there, right?
Yeah, it is what it is. Like what I would say is I want to say 2 things before we finish. So the first thing I'll say to the people listening is like, don't rush. Don't rush. It's not a race to get to first team because it might not be for you. There is a lot of pressure. And it's either for you or it's not. You're dealing with, I'm 32, my oldest player's 33. So I'm dealing with players that are, I'm going to probably give a debut this season to a couple of 16-year-olds that we've got in. But I'm dealing with players that have played in Spain for Valencia. I'm dealing with players that have not kicked a ball for the first team. I'm dealing with players that have played all over the world, different nationalities, different languages. It's tough. The pressures are tough. The owner calls you, what's going on? We've not won in 5 games. And then you have to deal with those things. You also have to deal with managing expectations after we come here last year, we beat Tampa Bay. They were the champions of the Eastern Conference. I've got to manage the expectations there of saying to my owner, listen, we probably shouldn't have done that. That's a really good result. So you have to manage that as well. That's not going to happen every week. The second thing I wanted to say to the listeners is like, people that are listening to this, first of all, thank you, because they're on the ground. They are working with the next Phil Foden. They are working with the next Callum Hudson-Odoi. And these podcasts, I think, are brilliant because no one's on here battering anybody. This is just for listening and to get a different viewpoint and a different slant on people that have been through what they're going through right now. I've been at Cray Wanderers, I've been at Welling United, going through that and understanding. And I think that a lot of these people that are listening to this, guys, they're volunteers. So they get up every morning for the love of the game, whether it's their son's team or whatever. They get up, they do 2 training sessions a week on a Tuesday, Thursday night, hammering down with rain, freezing cold, and they're in front of the kids. And then Sunday morning, they're there with the water bottles and, they've got to be, smiling, they've got to be positive. They do a brilliant job. They do an absolutely outstanding job. And I think if we can upskill these people that we've got doing this, mums, dads, everybody, I think we've got a chance of producing even better players because we've got the best right now, where we are right now, we have got one of the best youth development systems in the world, and we're not getting it right. We're still not getting it right. So I think, if we start to educate better earlier, as coaches and players, sky's the limit for us. But it's massively important to say thank you to these people that are listening because their commitment is unbelievable.
Yeah, great point, and what a great way to finish your show. But listen, H, thanks very much, mate. It's been really insightful. Thanks for your time. It's been fantastic. Glen, thanks as well, mate, as always. And
we enjoyed it.
hope you enjoyed that, listeners. Remember, if you've got any questions, don't be afraid to email them to us or message us on Twitter, and also any ideas for the shows or guests as well. But on that one, we'll see you soon. See you next time. Thanks again, boys.
Cheers, mate.
Welcome to the Coaching Family Soccer Coaching Podcast, a podcast for soccer coaches from grassroots to the pro game. Soccer coaches who love the game, love coaching, and want to get better. Join our community on Twitter @CoachingFamily.